Welcome to the Questionistas podcast. I'm Thomas.
And I'm Spencer.
Quick disclaimer, this is for education and entertainment purposes. If you need help, please see a professional. We are not experts, nor do we give medical advice. Take our words with a gallon of salt.
Hey, Thomas, what's the question today?
The question is, how do I handle feedback to and from other people?
Okay. So I don't like feedback. I mean, I do, but I found that I've had a lot of bad experience with feedback in the past, getting feedback, and sometimes, if I'm honest with myself, giving feedback.
Oh, yeah, I've got some good stories of not being very good at giving feedback. In fact, I was just reviewing our Working with Other People episode, and I would go around telling people to do the right thing, quotation marks around right, and they didn't do it. What the heck?
Why can't they just do what we know is best for them, right?
Yeah. Why can't everyone just listen to me because I'm smart? Before we dive into that, one thing I want to point is, what is feedback and also what is not feedback? And that second question gets a little gray because technically any sort of reaction to what you do or say is a type of feedback, but not all feedback is useful or good.
Yeah.
Or, somebody comes to you and they say, "You're dumb," or "You're a doo-doo head."
And then I punch you, which is my feedback to your feedback. But that's not effective, right? That's not useful or valuable to either one of us.
Ryan George on YouTube, he's got this hilarious video series called The First Time Someone Did X. And he's got the first time someone punched someone. And so one person is talking to somebody else and they're saying really mean things to them. And the person who's getting yelled at is just like lifting their fists and like, "What's happening?" And they punch him in the face. And the guy's like, "How? Why'd you do that?" And he's like, "Well, I didn't like the words coming out of your mouth, so I got my fist and I put it in the way of your mouth." So he's like, "Oh, well, I didn't like that." And he's like, "Oh, well, good. I didn't like what you were saying."
Which is a great example of technically feedback, but not the feedback that we want to encourage, right?
No. I mean, maybe there are times where a punch is appropriate, but we're going to talk about the vast majority of times where a punch is not.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about some rules about giving and taking feedback. Not rules, but principles and guidelines. They're the same, just from the perspective of the person receiving the feedback or giving the feedback. We're going to talk about reality, like getting feedback from physics and nature in the next episode.
That's a good idea.
I almost had them in the same episode, and that was going to be way too much.
Yeah.
We don't want to do a 2-hour podcast. So we want to talk about handling feedback to and from other people. And first, we want to talk about taking feedback. I want to talk about effective versus ineffective or good and bad. I want to talk about how do we handle feedback without it destroying our self-confidence, because I've done that before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things is you say, how can I improve? Here's my beautiful baby thing that's in my hand. And then you give me feedback and I say, yeah, there's no point. Why bother trying anymore, right?
Don't quit your day job.
Don't quit your day job.
Oh.
Which, again, probably not very effective feedback. But do you have any hard and fast rules, or how do you stop feedback from destroying the self-confidence that you have on a project?
I think one of the first things, and I'm probably going to harp on this in this show, is you can only ever do the best you can do, not the best you can imagine yourself to do. So no matter how much you succeed at a certain endeavor, you can always do better the next time, but you can't necessarily have done better this time. So whatever feedback you get, whatever success you have, doesn't mean that you failed. I know the phrase, "you could have done better." Could you have? Maybe. But it's more important to get in the habit of doing things than it is to get in the habit of doing them right. The doing them better will come later.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll get feedback, and it takes time and practice to tell the difference between different types of feedback. Some can be very subjective, some can be more objective. It depends on the field.
Well, I think about that phrase, you could have done better. Well, that's very subjective according to who.
Right? Like, what are we comparing it against?
I mean, my daughter, I remember years ago, she was playing the piano, and she played for 3-6 months. And then she just came home just bawling one day, and she's like, I can't play like the piano guys. You know, these famous YouTube sensations of this guy with a cello and this dude with a piano, and they are making just beautiful music together. And he's like, she thought, I thought I could be able to do that. I should be able to do better than what I'm doing currently. You know, and it was very destroying to her self-confidence, and it was really hard to explain to her. Practice is the difference, not some objective betterness that
or some magic inherent in your nature.
Yeah, like it took them years and years and years of practice to be able to get to the point where they're at, and she, I think, just didn't realize that. She was a very young child. I don't blame her, but I want to believe that I think even as adults we can subversively say that same phrase, you could have done better than what you did. Like, well, according to who? According to the piano guys, or according to my capacities and capabilities?
Right. Wow. How did we already, even without putting it in the outline, we got to talking about growth versus fixed mindset. The idea that you can grow and change. Your attributes are not fixed. You're not smart or dumb or creative. You can do things that help you be smarter, things that practice your creativity. Like, these are skills that can grow and change. And that's a very important thing to remember when taking and giving feedback, is yourself and the people you're talking to all have potential to be different. Mm-hmm. But that difference is for the future. For the past, like, what happened, whatever the reasons are.
Yeah.
One other thing I want to point out real quickly that we did not put in the outline as well is feedback from you to you. And maybe we talked about that when we talked about thinking alone. But these same principles apply when you're giving feedback to yourself and taking feedback from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the phrase, you are your own worst critic.
I want to talk about a couple of the different facets, I think, that we've identified. The first one, effective versus ineffective. I remember reading something in college, and it was from an author, and he says, when I show people some of my work, I get 3 types of feedback. The first one is, oh, it's so great, it's so wonderful, everything you write is wonderful. And then the second one is, it sucks, it's terrible, why do you bother? And then the third one will say, it's good here, but it's not okay here, and it doesn't make sense here. And the author said, the first 2 are liars, and the last one is valuable to me. Whether they're liars or not, they're not effective. There's no value in just getting someone to say, oh yeah, it's great, don't change anything. And then the other one says, change everything. And then the other one says, hey, I think I see what you're doing here, but it's not working here and here. And that one allows you to be able to have, some valuable encouragement, but also some reality bites of information of how to change and how to improve on what you're creating or what you're doing. Yeah. And I think one of the most ineffective, and this is maybe just a personal preference, is when someone says, why didn't you do X? And it's
obvious. Are you stupid?
Yeah. Well, and maybe it's similar to begging the question of, why are you so dumb? You know, it's like, I can't respond to that. I'm starting from a defensive standpoint when you ask such a terrible question like that. And so why didn't you do the right choice when you created this thing last time?
I said to my son the other day, When you want to tell people, well, obviously, or duh,
Mm-hmm.
well, obviously it wasn't obvious to them.
Yeah.
They had a reason for doing it differently. Whether you think it's a good reason or not, whatever, but if it were obvious, then they would have already thought that. Which means it's not obvious and you're just being delusional about it being, okay, I didn't say all this to my son. I always say common sense is what you know that you think other people should know.
Mm-hmm. Which is a great reminder when giving and taking feedback, because trying to wheedle out something that someone is telling you, even though they're not giving you the feedback. I could sit there and say, you're not giving me good feedback right now. Someone's giving me a whole bunch of, and then I'm giving bad feedback to their feedback, and then it's just a vicious cycle. But like there's opportunities maybe outside of giving and taking feedback to be able to educate someone. But in the moment when someone gives you feedback, you're like, yeah, well, your feedback sucks. Well, okay, that's not gonna help. But it's also one of the liars, right? Let's talk about one of the other facets. We're talking about negative and positive feedback. Tell me about that. Yeah,
and it was kind of a response to that it's great, it sucks, it's good, but, and he says the first two are lying and the last one is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
All three of them are valuable, but they're valuable at different levels and in different ways.
Okay.
English departments, here's an example. At like colleges or maybe even high schools and creative arts seem to have a sort of sadomasochistic relationship to feedback. Oh yeah, just tear it apart. Just take that red pen where you mark my errors and stuff and just make my manuscript bleed. Mwahaha. I'm like, okay, you keep it in the bedroom, but that is such a negative thing. People equate honest feedback with negative feedback, and that's not the same thing. And positive feedback is not necessarily honest feedback either. You don't want to do negative or positive. You want to do honest. And that's one reason I like the it's good, but, because that's somebody being honest. They're saying this part, or like this part was good for me. This part, not so much.
Yeah.
To finish answering why it's great and it sucks can still be useful is because people, especially non-skilled people, can be very useful for identifying when there is a problem. Even if they're terrible at recommendations or solutions.
Okay.
Especially like with something more creative. But with people who are not skilled in giving feedback, you often have to learn how to hear it's great, it sucks, it's ugly, and translate that to useful feedback. Oh, what they mean is it didn't appeal to them, or what they mean is something about the design is not connecting. When it comes to like writing, or maybe, no, this is mainly storytelling. There's 3 main types of writing feedback I've heard about.
Okay.
There's which means I'm confused at what's going on, or I don't understand what's going on. Oh yeah? Which is saying, I don't find what's happening to be believable, like with the characters or the world or the story. And the last one is, so what? Which means I'm struggling to care what you want me to care about. When we get into objective versus subjective feedback, it feels to me we're talking about feedback you use to identify that there's a problem versus feedback that you might use to help you identify a solution. Lots of people will be quick on recommending solutions. I learned this when I was working in an ad agency. Clients will be like, okay, here's what the solution should be.
Yeah.
And you can look at that and see, okay, let's peel that away and peel that away. Oh, there's the problem.
Why are you asking for this solution? Why do you want this solution, not 18 other options?
Because you've identified this problem, which the problem could be the client's attitude, but there could be an actual problem in the system. I'm going to bounce back and forth between professional and creative. I've heard it said, and I don't know who said it, you should listen to about 1 in 4 bits of feedback that you get.
Okay.
This is probably especially for creative endeavor because we're talking subjective. Because with creative endeavors especially, but even in other ones, personal preference is a huge factor. Like, I've talked to different people who read the same book or watched the same movie and had wildly different reactions to it. I've also heard other people watch a movie and say, it's an objectively bad movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, you're just an egotistical whatever. Now, moving into talking more about objective feedback, which, first off, complete objectivity is impossible. Okay, I'm going to throw that away now. There's experts that you can listen to on certain topics. For example, if you're trying to build an airplane and you talk to a physicist who specializes in aviation, they're going to give you probably some pretty good feedback on your airplane design. And theirs is based off of, which we'll talk about in another episode, their own feedback loop with reality on what actually physically works better. Or this happens a lot with my boss at work with design. He's got over 30 years of experience doing graphic design, user experience design. There's a lot of things that he knows either work or don't work because of experience.
Yeah. There's value with authoritative voices. There's value with experts.
I wouldn't say there's value with authorities, but maybe this is me using a specific... Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't touch on the authority part yet. Listening to an authority versus listening to an expert, we'll probably dive more into this in another episode, but an authority is somebody who is essentially in a higher position in the social structure than you are.
Okay.
Or at least you see them that way. But that doesn't mean that they're an expert. In fact, the best way to take advantage of experts is to look at what the experts mostly agree on. And the biggest way to be fooled by an expert is when an expert starts talking about something outside of their expertise. They're trying to become an authority on something that they don't know much about.
Okay. But
they think like, oh yeah, I'm an expert in this, so therefore I'm an expert in this. But really what they're doing is they're just transferring their authority. I like to say, listen to experts, ignore authority.
Okay.
Authority's irrelevant.
Pulling the authority card when giving feedback. I can see one place where it becomes valuable and in listening to, and that is when it's your boss and they can fire you essentially. And it's like, okay, well, I guess that's what I'm doing. And I disagree with you, but I like my job more than I like my preference here.
This is almost based in reality as well. My boss has had to have time where we're all discussing some way of designing something. And he says, we're out of time. We're going to do Y because we need to move on.
Yeah. And I think that one, I wish leaders were more honest with themselves or with their team when it comes with that type of feedback, where it's like, we could do the right thing, but we need to do the fast thing here. And the right thing is to do something fast and not overthink this or not spend more time on it.
That's something I learned at small companies or startups or whatever, is that sometimes you just need to get the thing out and keep moving.
Yeah. I want to touch on something for my professional career within product management, but I think this extends to creative endeavors and professional endeavors as well, which in product management, someone said that the most important thing you can do is to be the champion for the problem, not the solution.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Too often the product manager says, hey, we've got this great idea and it's going to make us a whole bunch of money. I've worked with doctors. I've worked with software. I've worked with quite a few different, usually around software, because that's the solution that we're utilizing. But I've worked in different industries where, as long as we recognize the problem at its core, and I say this, really what we're trying to solve is this, and then relying on a team of experts, that will come up with the right solution, and saying, okay, well, you've got an idea. Will that solve this problem? And so championing the problem and making sure that the problem is first and foremost allows the team to be able to function correctly, and allows you to maintain the vision of you're trying to solve for X. And so,
because sometimes we can all, even the people giving you feedback, can get stuck on solutions, but you can still benefit from whatever they're saying by seeing what the problem is. And you can be, if you're in this position on your team, you can be a boon for the team by helping everybody focus on, okay, remember, here's the problem that we're trying to solve, which can be solved in multiple ways. So before we get consumed with, executing a particular solution, considering all of our factors, let's pick what we think is the best solution right now.
Yeah. Which I want to reiterate, in a creative space, the problem may be, I'm going to create this piece of artwork and I'm going to put it in the middle of a studio or a museum. And I want it, and I want it to communicate, but
sorry, that sound that wasn't a suspicious sound. That was a terrified sound.
Oh, okay.
It sounded like I was going, meh. No, I was going, ah.
I've done this just because that was my undergrad, was creating artwork. And all the time I wanted to communicate or convey this feeling, the sense of dread or the sense of excitement or whatever emotion or thoughts I wanted to evoke. And I would stick it in the middle of a room and I'd say, okay, go. And the rest of the colleagues would say, I'm confused. It's not conveying what you want it to convey. Oh yeah, I don't find that believable. I don't believe that what you're using is conveying that. And then so what? I really don't care about this. It's not compelling to me. I think all three of those are very valuable in a creative space. And I if I think hard enough, it should be in a professional space as well, where, as long as I can maintain that problem, and that problem is I'm trying to convey X, I'm trying to convey this emotion or this thought or this feeling within others, when creating this. And so when they give me the feedback and they're like, I don't like it, I'm like, well, what do you not like about it? I don't care that you don't like it. And one of my favorite,
you're almost training through good questions. You're kind of training them in how to give you better feedback.
Oh, sure. But sometimes the feedback always has to start with, I don't like it. And, and I remember I worked with an artist. We did this really cool installation up at a university, where he just one day, he was just like, one day I took these pictures and they were dark. It was a pathway in the middle of the woods and it was dark and ominous. And I loved it. And I would show it to people and I'd get 50-50. Half people loved it, half people hated it. And the people that hated it said, I don't like that because it's dark and ominous. And I don't like dark and ominous things. I want something happy and chipper. And then the people that liked it said, I love it because it's dark and it's ominous. And it's like, okay, I've solved my problem because I've maintained the goal was to make something dark and ominous. And so the I don't like it's and the I like it's aren't really important, but as long as that's the first step, you can't stop there. You have to continue to dig deeper and say, okay, what are you talking about? Where are you going, and what problem is this solving for you? Or what problems do you see? And that's where the subjectivity comes into things, which is the facet that we've been talking about for a little bit. Nothing really is objective, and there's a lot of subjectiveness, and trying to pull out that subjectiveness. To summarize,
honestly, the most objective feedback is that subjective feedback in a way.
Yeah.
Because they're saying, if they say, I'm confused, they're technically being subjective about their feelings, but since what they're talking about is their feelings, that's an objective fact.
Yeah.
The objective thing is they were confused. They also said that's bad. Now we're getting into subjective.
Yeah. And ultimately, one of the things that I think is, we had to learn this in art school. And I remember this one woman, she joined our classes, and there was a group of colleagues. This cohort was together for 2 or 3 years already. And this woman comes in and the teacher was trying to couch this very kindly to her. And he's like, now we're going to do critiques and we're going to give each other feedback. And then sometimes it's not going to be good feedback. And sometimes it may hurt. And this woman just like, she just glazed over. She's like, I don't understand what you're talking about. And I looked at her and I said, We don't hate you. We hate your baby. And she just looked mortified to me. But it was the most succinct way, and probably not the most tactful way of someone helping them understand, like, listen, you know, what is it in writing? Kill your
darlings.
Kill your darlings. You know,
which I would append to the end if the story needs it. There's that
interesting.
There's that leaning on the side of sadomasochism versus or negativity versus honesty.
Mm-hmm.
Because guess what? Sometimes your darlings are what makes your story great because you love them and you're passionate about them.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're trying to include them even if some of them don't fit.
Yeah. And that's and I think that's true with other creative endeavors that I've had, but also in oh my gosh, the amount of times I've been told professionally to cut large swaths of work that I've done. And it's like, deal with it. We don't need that. The client or the customer or the leader doesn't need to hear all that backstory. They just need to know the answer, you know, and you go, oh no, but this is important. And you have to cut that and you have to kill that. But it's a hard separation of things that you're trying to get feedback on and things that are about you. You know, and that one, I don't
extend your identity into the thing you're getting feedback on, because that hurts.
It's a really difficult. How do you deal with that? Because it's a very difficult thing not to be in love with what you're making and have your darlings. And how do you
Well, there's two really important levels to it. And the first one is that if something you did is not seen as good or was not effective, that's okay. I want to do an episode someday about mistakes aren't bad.
Okay.
Something that is bad isn't bad. It just is. So that's the first part. The second part is there's a lot of things that you identify as part of you that really aren't or really don't have to be. Like, take people who are obsessed with sports teams and somebody says, your sports team sucks. And you take that with the same emotional level of, you suck.
Yeah. How dare you talk about me in that terrible way?
Or heck, even, I don't believe in your religion anymore that we both used to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, bro! You just said that part of my identity is false.
Yeah.
Even though they're talking about themselves and their subjective religious perspective.
Yeah.
There's a lot of suffering that happens because I keep touching on topics for other episodes, because we project our identity. Is there anything else we want to talk about taking feedback from others before we transition into giving feedback to others?
I think it works for both. And so here's your transition. It's a muscle. It takes practice. And the only way to do this is to just get in a room and put something in the middle of the room and let everyone look at it and talk about it. Whether that's posting something online, letting the trolls of the internet give you the feedback that you needlessly deserve.
Go Piranha's feed.
Yes. Or go hang out with a group of trusted friends and share something that you built or created and ask for feedback. Art school taught me it's exposure therapy at the end of the day. Is giving good feedback takes time, and you're going to, like you said, make a lot of mistakes. Getting good feedback or listening to the feedback and figuring out how to take it without feeling like they hate you, but they actually hate your baby. Like I had to consciously tell that to myself when people would, you know, I spent 3 months on this thing and it's, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of it. And they're like, I don't get it. This doesn't make sense. It's, you know, it was like, what were you thinking? Did you really waste 3 months doing this? And it's like, wow, okay, you suck. But what was the problem behind what they're saying? You know, and sometimes it required me to dig a little deeper and look past the jabs. And it's that exposure therapy that it just takes time and it takes practice, and you just got to get exposed to it somehow.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. So kind of
giving
transitioning
feedback.
into giving feedback.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that we said that a lot of things overlap. Up to this point, we've talked about your conscious processing of feedback given to you. Now, when we're going to talk about giving feedback to other people, we're going to do a bit of a focus on the subconscious biases and fallacies that kick in when you're not only giving feedback, but when you're getting feedback. These are things that you'll also want to be aware of affecting you at the subconscious level. Because again, very important thing, when you're reacting to the world, the intuitive subconscious has an immediate reaction, and it'll deliver some kind of message to your conscious mind sometimes. And then your conscious reason has a chance to do things after that, or to just try to justify the feelings that it just got. These are things you're going to want to be aware of when you're giving and taking feedback. Now, most important question here, essentially, when you're giving somebody feedback, that is you wanting to influence what someone does.
Mm-hmm.
The important thing here is, do you want to be right or do you want to be effective?
And what does effective mean? Do you want to be helpful? Do you want to be encouraging? Do you want to be...
Let's say you have a goal of helping your coworkers develop a healthy relationship with their coworkers so that they don't get overwhelmed. Like, I've got a designer on my team. She sometimes gets overwhelmed by requests from other people.
Sure.
And she's done a lot of this herself, but I've had a few chances to talk through some situations with her and offer some advice on how to make it okay. They keep spontaneously giving you stuff. If you immediately say, stop spontaneously giving me things, that's not necessarily going to work. But if you say, here's the process that I prefer you give things to me in, put it in this system, put it in this queue, and then let's have a meeting to talk about it.
Yeah.
You can tell that you're being effective because her relationship with those coworkers, partially because of the advice I was giving, started to improve. And their stress level started to go down. The other thing is, you can go onto Facebook and you can find 1,000 people who think they want to be effective, but really just want to be right. They argue, they debate, they degrade, they condescend to people on the other side of issues than them, and they think, I'm being a good activist and I'm changing things.
Mm-hmm. Or they fawn. I think the opposite is they fawn and they placate and they, wow, you're so right. This is the best advice I've ever heard. You know, it's again, it's not as valuable. It's just as invaluable as destroying and bringing down. Right.
So good example of this, going back to Facebook, is I would have arguments with my uncle on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
He's dead, curse his heart. And I would try to get him to change his mind on something. And I was also getting really emotional. I'd talk to him, I'd argue with him. Was it effective? No. Did his behavior change? No. How did I feel? Pissed off. When it comes to giving feedback, gosh, for anything, you got to compare what you're doing with your goals and your results.
Yeah.
If they are not matching up, you need to change something and not protest that the world needs to change.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to have to do this rapid fire so that we can keep this within time, but we've got a whole bunch of biases here that make feedback worse or ineffective.
The biggest driver behind most of these is you want to protect your agency, your opinion of yourself, your idea that you have the freedom to choose what you want, and that you're the boss of yourself. So there's a bunch of these things that kick in, and there's whole research on a bunch of them. But I'm going to kind of...
And where do these come from?
Oh, yeah. These come from cognitive science research. I've compiled a bunch of them into a list, and this is just a handful from one section. Okay. of the book or the website or whatever it is going to be I'm trying to put together. This part has to do with my opinions are important. So there's reactance bias. That is the tendency to rebel against direction from others in order to feel a sense of personal agency. There's the boomerang effect. When attempting to change someone's beliefs or behaviors, instead strengthens those things. There's the rejection of instruction. Rejecting direction from others because of distrust, rebelliousness, or perceived superiority. Mm-hmm. There's this hierarchical relationship establishment that can get in the way of you hearing good feedback.
Yeah.
There's the backfire effect. This is probably the biggest one. You tend to defensively solidify your beliefs when presented with disproving evidence. So somebody says, hey, here's something, a fact or evidence or study that shows that you're wrong. The same part of your brain that kicks in when you're being physically attacked kicks in. You're like, okay, I'm putting up my walls. I'm gonna argue this until I'm blue in the face. That one's so huge, and it's so subconscious. Mm-hmm. All of these reasons you're coming up with for why the other person is a frickin' idiot is not coming from logic, but it's coming from a desire to feel smart, to feel important.
Yeah.
And so you're not using rationality, you're rationalizing. And that's why you can't just look at your emotions or just look at your logic. You have to look at your behavior and how it works. A few more of these. Recommendation fallacy. This one's fun. You believed that your recommendation was a decision when serving as an advisor to a decision maker. So that can happen when you're like working with a boss and you give some feedback and they're like, and they're like, okay, thank you for that. And then they do something else.
Yeah.
You look like you have out there. Go ahead.
Yeah. I've got one personal experience where when I was in college and I'm making lots of decisions and I'm trying to find myself out, and I was talking with someone that was an old someone that I'd known for a long time, and they'd gone through college and they'd gone through and they gave me like 16 bits of advice, little nuggets of like, I'd recommend studying this way and I'd recommend doing this and recommend that and recommend this. And then what was interesting is all those recommendations were a chain of events leading up to, and that's why you should become a doctor, or that's why you should do this much bigger thing. And I remember like, whoa, you want me to do this big thing where each of your nuggets of recommendations were actually pretty valuable and really interesting. And then they made a leap. And then they made a leap to, and that's why you should be a doctor. And that's why you should not pursue the direction that you're going, whatever. I can't remember exactly what it was. And
the other stuff was still useful though, right?
It was. And it can
be easy to throw out the whole thing because they gave you that extra conclusion.
Yeah. And I was like, whoa, I don't want to go to that conclusion that you took me to, which was the ultimate recommendation. But it was like, they assumed that the decision had been made and thus I'm going to change my major. But I remember saying, I'm going to pause you just for a second. I said, I love you. I appreciate you. Your recommendations and your advice is very helpful, but I want you to understand that I may not use all that advice and I want you to be okay with that. They stopped giving me advice. They kind of stopped talking to me. And it was just like,
you attacked their feeling of self-importance.
I did. And I totally didn't mean to, but it was also, they're older than me. They're more experienced. There was a social hierarchy of I have the knowledge and I know what you will make you successful if you just do the following things. And I challenged that, and I didn't mean to, but at the same time, I want to say one of the few times I can be proud of myself that I set a boundary with that feedback saying, hey, thanks for the feedback, but I'm going to decide to do what I need to do with this. Which was probably for the person giving the feedback saw me as a recommendation fallacy where it's like, no, this is actually just healthy boundary making of like, I appreciate your feedback, but I'm not going to make the same decision as you. And so them
boundary making is definitely an example of different goals that can conflict.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I want to have a good relationship with this person.
Yes.
I want my boundaries to be respected. There's a chance that you could do everything right and the other person is just like, nope, I'm done with you. And sometimes there might be situations where, yeah, maybe they go ramble on about things and they're kind of encroaching on your boundaries, but you find a lot of value from the things that they say. That might be a situation where you're like, but I'm going to suffer a little bit of boundary pushing because I find value in the other things they say. So this is another reason to not beat yourself up too bad about the consequences of your actions. So you see the results and you compare them to your goals and your behavior. But I think one really important thing is to never make up your mind on what actually happened and why. Just keep experimenting, keep learning.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it changed our relationship at that point when I set that boundary. But at the same time, I learned a lot and I appreciated a lot of the recommendations and advice and feedback that person was giving me. But ultimately, I was trying to solve a completely different problem than they thought I was trying to solve, and they came to a different conclusion than I did. And again, the solutions are not the important thing, but the problems and the focusing on the problems and focusing on.
And you got to remember that when you are the advice giver, everything that we talked about for how we would prefer to receive advice or feedback, we need to apply to ourselves.
Mm-hmm. We've got a whole bunch of other biases, but we're out of time.
I think that they're good for another episode.
The big one that comes to mind when giving feedback is not having all the right information. Maybe you could sit down and do a grow session with the person, goals, realities, options, way forward, and get a lot of realities. And maybe you can get as many realities down as possible. But I guarantee you that person did not spend any time asking my realities.
Exploring the question or the problem is always going to be way more effective than mandating a solution, especially because information you lack, but also because they get ownership in the solution.
Yeah. And so ultimately giving that feedback without knowing all the information is going to leave you giving advice that ultimately is not going to be effective or helpful. And I'm conflating advice with feedback because those are different things, right? And I think where's the advice is not feedback bias. I'm sure that's one of your biases, right?
Well, kind of similar was the recommendation fallacy.
Yeah.
Was when you give a recommendation to someone and you think it was a decision.
Well, we got to continue this topic, and I think there's a lot more in feedback that we can discuss. The lingering question that I've got is, what about feedback that's just natural? That when reality hits you in the face because you punched a wall and you gain feedback from the wall. How do you handle that feedback is my next big question.
How do you actually learn from reality instead of hitting your head against the wall?
Mm-hmm.
Demanding it move. So thank you everybody for listening. Have a wonderful day and keep asking questions.